it's a round of introductions. So again, for this meeting, we didn't have, there may not be this, I know tomorrow's, and we have 3 meetings that are scheduled. Today was focused on, of course, our regulatory partners, our contractors, and our for disposal and recycling. And granted, it's open to the public. We know tomorrow we have our meetings with our commercial applicators and private applicators and industry reps. And then on Thursday, we are meeting with our pesticide registrants. And so with both of those meetings, we literally had thousands of people that we sent the invites out to notify them. So we expected our first meeting today to be a little smaller pool of people. And so we may not have the thousands in the waiting room or hundreds in the waiting room, but it'll be a good first meeting for me too, to go through all of this information. And our goal is, ultimately, I've got a presentation to kind of go through kind of an overview of the program, our approach, but really our goal is to be able to get some questions answered, help us give us some guidelines and direction as we develop the rules. So I've got questions kind of embedded in, and of course, whether we get some of that feedback today or information that people can provide me, send me an email and provide more information and comments after the meeting if we don't cover everything today, or things that we think of after the fact. So. Sonia, quick question for you. Do we have people that are, as far as in that aren't panelists that we just don't see, or I guess, or trying to depend on whether decide whether we have more people waiting or that are watching that we may not see on screen as a panelist?
So, yes, we have 6 attendees other than the panelists. And if you look at your participants down across the bottom and click that up, you should get the 2 different, tab options. Up at the top, it'll say panelists, and then it'll say attendees. So we have 8 panelists and 5 attendees.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I still haven't figured out Zoom after all these years, so.
I think it's
Wonder,
9. Yes, John.
You want to go ahead and start then at this point?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everyone. My name is Wandrar Gavru. I'm a Division Director for Plant Industry at Colorado Department of Agriculture, and where Pesticides Program is also hosted. And I think let's do a round of introduction before we just move on. And so, John, I know everyone knows you, but you introduce and then we'll go on.
So yeah, I'm happy to say I know several of you, and but my name is, for those that don't know me, I'm John Scott. I am with the Colorado Department of Agriculture. I am the Pesticide Section Chief.
Thank you. Colin? You are on mute.
Thank you very much. I'm also having trouble with the technology. Colleen Bresnahan with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. I am the Hazardous Waste Program Manager.
Thank you. Trevor?
I'm Trevor with G. Phillips & Sons. We are the contractor for the state of Colorado for the Ag Container Recycling Council. So we are the contractor that collects the empty pesticide jugs and drums.
Thank you. Kelby?
Yes, Kelby Neal with Clean Earth Environmental Solutions. We are a hazardous waste disposal company. We do a lot of pesticide collection programs across the country, and just here to be a resource if needed.
Thank you. Tim?
Hey there, Tim Brass. I'm Assistant Director for Parks, Wildlife, and Lands at the Department of Natural Resources.
Thank you. And Trevor?
I already went.
Oh, sorry. Michael, it's switched. Sorry. Michael, please. Thanks.
Good morning. Michael Carr. I'm with the Colorado State Patrol. I'm the hazardous materials captain.
Thank you. I think we completed CDA comms. It's from CDA Communications the Directorate, and then she's here to support us. Thank you. Yes, introduce yourself. Yeah, now you are on
okay.
Good.
Hi, I'm Sonia Hawkes, and I work in the Communications Division at the Department of CDA.
Thank you. As John already introduced, this is the first round of the stakeholder meeting, basically focusing on recycling, regulators, and then disposal companies, basically to provide us the technical input. And so before taking much of time, John will walk us through the legislative, our intent, the objective, and then finally also outline the various questions and then information. We'll be really looking forward to develop our rules and then basically lay foundation for the program and operation wise. Therefore, we have come here today with a clean slate. We have not put our rules in place yet. We have a very short timeline, and then John will walk us through everything one-on-one, and then finally we'll put also the last slide on the questions that we want to really engage. But that does not really limit. You can add, either questions or any discussion. But basically, those are areas that would be really like to get your input on the specifics of the program. So, without much ado, and then I'll pass on John to walk us through the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, get myself off mute here. Can everybody see the screen?
Yes, this is great. Thank you.
There?
Yeah.
And thank you, WonderEd. Hey, WonderEd, can we double check? I want to get you on the back side there, double check, make sure that Kathy does have the link to the meeting, because make sure that she can get in. Or Sonia, if we can verify that. I just thought about that when she comes in to join to talk on her part here. So.
Okay, can you tell me who again? Sorry about that.
Kathy Chang.
Oh, yeah, I'll check with her.
Okay, I just want to make sure she has the link. So, anyway, good morning, everyone. Again, I really appreciate everybody willingness to be able to take time to join us today. Very excited that, of course, we've been working for several years on getting the approval and ultimately being able to pass the legislation for the department to create its pesticide disposal and recycling program. Over the years, again, we've had some stakeholder meetings. I know several of you that I've met through meetings over the years. You've helped provide a lot of good information. And again, I just really appreciate you taking the time to help give us additional feedback as we get the program up and running. Now, not all of you may know that on May 26th, we signed House Bill 26-1111 into law, creating the department's pesticide disposal and recycling program. The key statutory requirements on that were the development or creation of the enterprise board. So the department's program will be administered and run with the enterprise board and their responsibilities. And of course, our very first order of business is to create rules to establish a list of products that will be exempt from the disposal fee. That's one of the pieces of legislation that came out of the process as we ran the bill that ultimately, there was a desire that for those products that may not necessarily be disposed of in the course of our program, that the industry really wanted to see a list of exemptions created of products that the disposal fee would not apply to. So that's one of the rule elements that we're going to be speaking about today. Of course, the board needs to establish product registration fees, establish applicator disposal fees, because there will be a fee charged to the applicator, and then any other associated rules. And then, of course, the enterprise board's responsibility also is ultimately to engage with or work with the contractors and approve the contracts for the disposal program and recycling. Now, over the last several years, and as we've gone through this process, I've tried to collect as much information, talking with other states, with contractors over the years. And then, of course, Iowa State University did a survey in 2024 of states and their disposal programs. And so at least there was a collection of information on how states administered their disposal programs. There were 37 states, at least in that survey, that were able to provide an overview. And ultimately, what I learned was that kind of like all state pesticide programs, everybody does it a little bit different. The first element, as far as how state disposal programs are funded, and it's really all over the board, either through registration fees, applicator licensure fees. Some states have an enforcement component. If there's enforcement actions, they're funded through those enforcement civil penalties. Some states approach it through gross sales. Some states have EPA grants that are dedicated towards their disposal programs, or that they put a portion of their EPA grants toward the disposal program. And then, of course, general funds that some states have general fund tax dollars that are passed through to fund their disposal programs. For those programs that have specific disposal fees, those fees I found range from $25 to $50 from the states that I was able to identify. Or the disposal portion of the program is just funded out of the registration fees that they collect. And they don't really have a specific disposal fee that they break out or charge. It's just part of their overall budget for their product registration fees. I've talking with some states, Maryland comes to mind, talking with the program manager there. He's like, there are years we don't fund our disposal program because we just don't have the extra funds to be able to run it. So it's very dependent on their product registration and what their budget allows. So it's kind of hit and miss from year to year on whether they're able to conduct a program. And then state surveyed, I could only find that Arkansas was really the only state that had specific regulations that exempted specific products tied to their funding. Now, as far as the services that are offered, once again, it's kind of all over the board. There are states it's open to everyone. Even with those states, the feedback that I received from those states, that they still try and focus it towards industry, commercial applicators, municipalities, and agriculture. There are those states that are geared more towards commercial and private applicator focused. There are those that allow their dealers also to do disposal. Some of the feedback that I received from those states was that, and ultimately I'll get to a little bit further in a presentation of why there are caps that are put on in the amounts, because some of those states that allowed their dealers ultimately were overwhelmed with the volume of product that dealers were actually disposing of. And so that had to be a consideration that they put into place just due to the volume, how quickly it would eat up their budget. And then there are states, Colorado being one of those, with universal waste collections or county programs with universal waste collecting pesticides and batteries and oil and paint. Limitations on those where those we found were generally limited to the county residents, excluded businesses, and of course limited to smaller quantities, lower toxicity pesticides. So ultimately, and again, why we created the program, because there's always been this gap in Colorado for our commercial applicators and our private applicators that, one, have products in larger volumes that they need to dispose of. And of course, those products that may be restricted use or higher toxicity, fumigants in some cases, that really left this gap in Colorado. But we geared our program to be very specific to focus on our commercial and private applicators. And how House Bill 1111 structured the program for us here in Colorado is it will provide funding through pesticide product registration fees and applicator disposal fees. The service is only offered to our licensed commercial applicators and private applicators. Now, private applicators is a broad definition in Colorado. Essentially, a private applicator is any person that raises an agricultural commodity for use by man. So that can even go right down to the someone growing a garden. So it's a very, in their backyard. It's a very broad term. So it has a lot of flexibility as far as who we can extend the program services to. It does limit disposal to registered pesticides. And then additional disposal limitations is we will not be doing universal waste. So we won't be collecting batteries or light bulbs or anything like that our other disposal programs for universal waste in the state allow. We will not be accepting rinsates. Obviously, registered products that we determine and identify as exempted from the disposal registration fees will be excluded. And then unregistered products, home brews was the main focus on that. That we one thing in Colorado, of course, especially I was watching and looking at a month or so back as we were having a lot of concerns with pine beetle. We saw some of the recommendations from Forest Service of using diesel oil to treat your down trees for pine beetle. Those homebrew type products that people come up with to treat a pest on their property, we will not be accepting those types of things. So it's intended for registered products. Now I'll say, and as we go through this presentation, you're going to see some areas I've got highlighted in blue. And these are really the start of where the questions that we have that we really want to answer through the course of this process. Now, getting into how we intend to administer the program conceptually. Again, talking with our contractors in other states over the years, one of the things that was very clear that for our disposal program, we needed to develop a registration portal. And so that is going to be one of the things that between now and obviously once we are ready to start in scheduling events, we will be working on a disposal registration portal. Now, some of the information, and this is the first question I get for our contractors, is what other pesticide information do contractors need? At this point, applicator, what I've seen from other states and on their registrations, applicator information, demographic information, product name, EPA registration number, the type of product, whether it's a herbicide, insecticide, fungicide, the formulation that it's in, the amount that they have estimated that they will be bringing in, and then container integrity was another question I saw on some of the questionnaires from other states. And so I'll ask that question, I guess, initially to Kelby and Trevor and anyone else that wants to chime in. Is there other pesticide information in our portal that we need to consider?
For disposal, we really don't need an EPA registration number. Typically, on an inventory, we would need to know, product name if they know it. A lot of times it'll be unknown because the labels have been destroyed or lost. If it's a liquid, the number of 2.5 gallon jugs or drums or totes or whatever it is, and if they can estimate the total volume of liquid. For instance, or there's 12 jugs, and 6 of them are half full, something like that. If it's solids, mainly just solid, the product name, and then the number of bags, if they know how many bags it is, and then the total weight um, is pretty important as well.
Okay, super. Thank you, Kelby.
Yeah, and
Any other
I would say for us, for the ACRC, we can't take jugs that have had consumer home garden, pest control, and swimming pool maintenance. So basically, containers that previously held products labeled for consumer use in households, lawn and garden, and swimming pool uses are not eligible in our program for free pickup.
And Trevor, and remind me if I'm not remembering this correctly, and you guys have a lot of information as far as what is and isn't allowed for the recycling program, correct?
Yeah. I was actually just reading that off the ACRC website.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, but yeah, we have flyers and brochures and everything that we send out to everyone of how the containers need to be prepared, triple rinse, the caps off and everything, and then what is accepted and what's not.
Perfect. Any other thoughts?
Can I ask a question? This is Colleen.
Absolutely.
So while you don't need the EPA registration number for the pesticide itself, the generators are generators of hazardous waste. So are you collecting their EPA ID number as a hazardous waste generator? That should go with the hazardous waste manifest. Or if you're collecting it as universal waste, I actually want to clarify something. Pesticides are one category of hazardous waste that can be managed as universal waste. So I would be careful, John, saying you're not collecting universal waste, because pesticides can be managed as universal waste, which is a less stringent set of management requirements under the hazardous waste regulations. I think you just need to clarify you're not collecting non-pesticide universal waste, which are the other categories you mentioned, the batteries, the waste oil. So I would encourage you to follow the universal waste requirements for pesticides, because if those aren't followed, then the full set of hazardous waste regulations apply to the hazardous waste pesticides. So if that makes sense. So, but getting back to my question, the company that is collecting the pesticides, are you getting the EPA ID number from the generators as you collect the pesticides, or are you becoming the generator and then would you have your own separate ID number?
Yes, you're going to find that applicators and farmers are not going to have an EPA ID number. They're not.
So what are they doing now when they're disposing of their pesticides?
I don't have an answer to that question, because they're probably not disposing of them. And if they did, they would be considered, the contractor probably handles them as like a conditionally exempt small quantity generator. But we are going to manage the pesticides for disposal as universal waste.
Okay. So you'll be
typically when we do these, I'm sorry.
You'll be registered as a universal waste handler then?
Yeah. Typically when we do these events, we also assume generator status.
Okay, that gets to the core of my question. You're basically taking that on. So you're becoming the generator. It becomes a waste in your possession, so we don't need it for the individual entities you're collecting from.
Correct.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Colleen. I appreciate the clarification there. Some of that terminology is still new to me, so. So I'm assuming, so under the universal waste regs, Colleen, a generator is any person that is creating hazardous waste. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, so the universal waste requirements are a subset of the hazardous waste regulations. So it's still hazardous waste, but it's a less onerous set of requirements to encourage proper disposal or recycling. And so, yes, they are. So the generator is whoever has possession of the product when it is determined that it's now a waste, right? And so that can happen at different stages. And so under this program, it sounds like that waste determination is going to be made at the collection site. So then the collection site can become the generator rather than the waste determination being made by the individual user, right? Your individual applicator. And that's fine. Normally, if they're disposing of it, if they're contracting it for disposal directly, they're the generator. So they would have to have typically, depending on the volume, an EPA number, and as somebody mentioned, that what used to be called conditionally exempt small quantity generators, now called very small quantity generators. There are less requirements for those, and so they may not need to get a number if they are a smaller quantity generator than your typical, larger applicator would be. So those smaller generators, the very small quantity generators, can all be bulked into a larger facility, but then this facility or this collection site will then become the generator of that larger volume of waste. So
Is there
it is
any
of the hazardous waste regulation. So it's not like it's it's not like it's not hazardous waste, it's still hazardous waste, but we call it universal waste because it's less onerous.
Colin, thank you. And do you have size? What does constitute as small and medium and large? Is there any dimension?
Yeah, those are defined in the regulations. I think it's 100 kilogram, up to 100 kilograms. That's per year, basically, or per month. I forget the time frame. Is very small quantity. Between 100 and 1,000 kilograms is small quantity, and above 1,000 is large quantity.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments?
And I also want to point out too is as time has progressed, the pesticides aren't RCRA regulated anymore. We're seeing less and less of the old highly toxic pesticides that have RCRA codes. Most of the time, though, they're not hazardous.
Well, they may not be listed, but they may be characteristic. So that's if as the generator, you'll have to make a hazardous waste determination. And if they turn out that they're not hazardous, that's fine. But you have to go through that process. Because we still are regulated, and they are still regulated if they meet the toxicity characteristic. That's probably the big one for pesticides. If there's any listed pesticides, then yes, those would be hazardous. But yeah, you'll have to make that determination to verify whether or not they are managed as, again, universal waste pesticides under the hazardous waste regulations.
Yeah, we're still shipping them as hazardous materials, just not hazardous waste.
Okay. Yeah, but again, you'll just have to keep your paperwork because, yeah, we'll be watching. EPA will be watching.
Okay, we'll move on here. Exemptions for registration disposal fees. Again, in our research, I was only able to identify one state, Arkansas, that they actually exempt classes of products, and they do that through again classes of products: flea and tick collars, insect repellents, insect gel baits, disinfectants, aerosols not labeled for ag use. That's essentially their criteria from their rules. And they have a flat $50 pesticide registration product disposal fee. Other states surveyed, again, don't exempt products. They essentially, they don't break out their pesticide disposal fee within their registration fees. Registrant just pays a registration fee, and then they allocate in their budget what they're going to put towards their disposal program. So it's not, again, broken out where you actually see it in the registration fee. So a question for the contractors. Are you aware of any other states that exempt products from their disposal program or from their fees for the disposal program?
I am not.
Anyone else? Okay, that's what we continue to at least what I've seen, and so it's we're going to continue to ask that through the process with all of our stakeholders, because ultimately, again, we want to be able to see other states that may structure any exemptions that they apply towards their disposal program.
Let me back up on that, John. Most of them will not allow a product to be disposed of if it's not an EPA registered pesticide.
So again, so like a home brew, you wouldn't accept something like that, something that
Yeah, or like diatomaceous earth or fertilizer. But as soon as the fertilizer has, a pesticide in it, then they accept it.
okay. Now moving on to the CDA disposal fees. Now, conceptually, how we planned this as we were developing the program in our the disposal portal, disposal registration portal, that we want to have the portal be able to calculate any applicator fees for the disposal event. So as they enter in their demographic information, what they intend to bring in, we want to build this system that will calculate any fees that will be the responsibility of the applicator. I'll say that the disposal fees for the applicator are really to supplement the program, to additional funding as far as for education and administration of the program. It's not the main funding factor for the program. But one of the questions, of course, that's come up as we're talking and we've started to work through this is the applicator payment, whether it can be pre-disposal, so whether we can charge them at the time of that they register for the event, or does it have to be post-disposal or at the time of the event? So a few other questions that we've looked at are that some states allow applicators to dispose up to X amount at no charge, and then fees apply over that set limit. And then we've also seen some state put caps on the amount of pesticides accepted per event per year. And then those caps range from anywhere from 250 to 2,000 pounds, 2,500 pounds, or 2,000 gallons. So a couple questions for the contractors and for you as well, Colleen. I guess, Colleen, your question came up in my head after your last comment there on the last slides. But I'll start out for the contractors. Do you, in working with any of your other states now, do you accept fees for the states at the events and collect those fees? Do you guys have a mechanism or any states that approach it that way at their disposal events?
Not recently, but years ago, Oklahoma was really hard on that 2,000 pound limit. I don't think they monitor it that much any longer. But years ago, we were collecting from applicators that had over 2,000 pounds. I'll be honest with you, a lot of times they'll just take it back with them. They'll get to the 2,000 pound limit, and if we're not going to take it for free, they'll just hold on to it to the next time. But is there mechanisms of doing it? Yes, there are ways of doing it. Are we currently doing it on any of the pesticide collection contracts that we currently have? No, we're not, but it can be done. It would need to be done. It's almost impossible to do before the materials are collected, because an applicator may claim they have X number of pounds to dispose of and make a payment for that. And then they get to the event and it's X plus 300 more pounds. So it almost has to be done um, during the event. If the state does decide to go that route, you almost need to set it up as an appointment system where we know Farmer X is coming at 7 a.m. to drop his material off, where you don't have everybody showing up at the beginning um, planning on dropping their materials off, because it also does slow down the process. We got to fill out a little invoice, we've got to collect payment, we got to put their material on the scale, weigh each person's stuff by itself, so it does slow down the process considerably.
Okay, good to know. And then the next question, should disposal caps be considered? And that kind of, I guess, for both of you, Kelby and Colleen, because Colleen, you said something that if you hit over certain amounts, that the universal, the size amount could come in where they could cross into a category that they'd have to have a establishment. Is it establishment number?
So I think I might have confused you. So I was talking about the generator category numbers. So for universal waste, if it's treated as universal waste, we really go into universal waste handlers, and so the collection contractor would become a universal waste handler. There are no limits. It just the categories are different. So there's a small quantity handler of universal waste and a large quantity handler of universal waste, and the requirements for each of those is a little bit different, again, depending on which category they fall into. Large quantity handler has a little bit more requirements than a small quantity handler. But for those categories, for the site itself, or wherever you're collecting, to be the difference between a small quantity universal waste handler and a large quantity is 5,000 kilograms in a calendar year. So again, it's not a limit. It's just which category do you fall into and what are your requirements? And that's the same thing with a hazardous waste generator. Those numbers that I gave you before, those are hazardous waste generator criteria. So it's just what bucket you fall into and what requirements apply to you. That's all that is. It's not a limit, really. It's just how we, sort of separate the folks that generate lots of waste from those who don't, and then there's more stringent requirements on the ones that generate more waste. That's all that is. But for these pesticides, if they're following the universal waste requirements, a lot of that goes out the window, because we then fall into those other buckets of universal waste handlers rather than hazardous waste generators. So it just shifts the requirements into a different area of the regulation. So, and then just to kind of back up, and one of the contractors mentioned that things aren't managed as hazardous waste. That from the standpoint of the way we track it, that's true. If a pesticide is a universal waste, it's not tracked against the hazardous waste generator categories for the generators. So it may still be regulatorily a hazardous waste, but if it's called a universal waste and managed that way, it doesn't count as a hazardous waste technically till it gets to the end site. The disposal facility manages it as a hazardous waste. So very confusing. RCRA is not easy.
Well, and that was my main concern. We hadn't considered if there needed to be any concern as far as if applicators are bringing in, totes or mini bulks, if they cross over a certain threshold. I know, Kelby, you said as the contractor, you guys assume that role as the generator, but I didn't know if in the process from getting from their farm or to a disposal event, ultimately things they need to be aware of, or if there's any threshold that they may pass that they need to be aware of. And again, Colleen, where that falls into your shop as far as if there's regulations that may apply. So I'm not exactly sure where they cross that line.
So if they're household or what would fall into a very small quantity generator category, there really are no requirements for them. They can drive their waste to wherever, not a problem. And then it comes to one of these collection facilities. And then the collection facility or the collection site, that's where the requirements really attach. So the individual entity bringing the product, if they are a very small quantity generator, there really isn't much for them at all. It's because we want to encourage them to bring it to the right place, right? So we don't put a lot of requirements on them. So, but if you had like a small quantity generator who would then be themselves a small quantity handler of universal waste, they do have some requirements. So if you have a large entity bringing you a large amount of this waste, then yeah, they might have some requirements that they have to follow, but that's their, that's up to them to follow those. Once it hits the collection facility, it's just, the collection facility's requirements under the regulations that they have to follow.
Mm.
Pauline, when we finish up, could you send me an email just referring to where I need to find that information, just so I can get my head around it a little bit better? And
yeah, I will send you where our regulations are, which are not easy. And then we do have some a guidance document up on our website I'll send you that kind of discusses it in a little more simplistic terms. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I just do have a question, Colin. Is there any distinction between registered pesticide and then canceled or old pesticides in terms of categorization of universal versus hazardous waste? And then is there any distinction?
There can be, yeah. Not all pesticides would necessarily be a hazardous waste. Some of them are listed waste. Some of them might be characteristic, but if they weren't managed as universal waste and they're just hazardous waste, each pesticide, there'd have to be a hazardous waste determination made on it. By bulking it all into a category of universal waste, that doesn't necessarily have to be done, right? So it simplifies it. But individual, like households, are exempt from the hazardous waste regulation. So household generated pesticide waste is not hazardous waste. It's solid waste because households are exempt. But it will depend on the pesticide. And I'm not as familiar with you guys as far as the registration process goes, but I think that probably on the label, there might be a determination right there on the label for each pesticide. Is that true, that, how it has to be disposed of?
It'll have directions for disposal.
Okay.
I'll say, yeah, the vast majority of products, ultimately have, use on the, the site of application until gone, preferably.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
There are directions for disposal.
So it seems to me that the hazardous waste determination has been made up front as the product was being manufactured. So if it already has the disposal requirements on it, that's what you guys are following. So it's not traditionally a waste generator has to make a hazardous waste determination at the end when it's waste. But because everyone, the manufacturer of the product knows what it's going to be and how it has to be managed at the end, I think they're making that hazardous waste determination up front.
A lot of times it's so vague, it'll just say follow local state regulations for disposal.
Okay. So maybe they're not.
No.
Yeah. But again, if it's managed as universal waste, then that determination doesn't have to be made the way the regular hazardous waste determinations need to be made. It then, once it gets to its destination facility and they're managing it and however they're going to manage it, those are usually the permitted facilities that are then either doing some recycling or treatment or disposal, and they're permitted to figure out what they're managing and how they need to handle it.
Thank you.
A question for Captain Carr, and I don't know if we missed Captain Carr with Colorado State Patrol. My apologies if we did, Captain. Question for you is, are there, as far as volumes as our applicators are transporting, pesticides to sites that we need to make sure that we're communicating to the industry so they're aware. I know years ago, as far as that, and I think in the aspect of small quantities of fumigants, aluminum phosphide, where, I mean, years ago it was, you could carry a case and then it went to, you could only have one container, and then it went back to 10 containers, and then it went over the years, it's gone back and forth. But thinking of those types of products that our applicators need to be, we can educate them to make sure that as they're bringing product to an event, are there any aspects that we need to communicate, and as far as for transporting product to an event and volume?
Yeah, so it all depends on what exactly the material is and how it's classified. So if it falls under the highly dangerous materials, so that's toxic or organic peroxides, dangerous when wet, those are required to be placarded no matter the quantity. Outside of that, it needs to be anything over 1,001 pounds is going to require placarding if it still falls under the hazardous materials guidelines in table 1 or table 2, if you're familiar with what I'm talking about. Does that make sense? Is that what you're asking?
It does, yes, sir. Did you say
Okay.
1,001 pounds?
1,001 pounds is the limit to where it needs to be placarded. So anything over that, if they're transporting it, that requires a placard. And all the materials you can find in table 2 there. I mean, there's a bunch of materials to figure out if it's a table 1 or table 2 material.
Could I ask you to send me that reference to those? It's been some years since I've pulled that up.
Yep, I'll send you an email with it.
Are the fumigants, are they considered the no matter what the quantity?
Was that question to me?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Captain.
Sorry, can you ask?
So, like, I'm assuming the fumigants. I mean, the fumigants are the ones. The aluminum phosphide is probably the biggest or the largest amount of highly toxic products that are applied by our applicators that comes to mind. Is that, am I correct that from what you said that now those are classified, it's any amount and has to be placarded? And that'd be aluminum phosphide, fat phosphine gas. I don't know if there's a lot of sulfuryl fluoride that's used in the state. It's primarily going to be phosphine, methyl bromide.
Yeah. Let me, I don't actually have that table pulled up. Maybe pull the table up and look through it real quick. I don't want to hold up the conversation while I do that. I'll get back with you.
No problem. Yeah, and you can get back to me on that. I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I've just questions.
Doesn't the universal waste rules relax some of the DOT placarding requirements, because tractors are going up and down these country highways all day long every day, and they're not placarding the tanks. All it takes is one tote's going to weigh 2,200 pounds. They're not going to placard their vehicle. The farmer's not going to have placards to put on the side of his truck. He's going to come in a pickup truck.
Yeah. So there are some relaxed regulations for the farming industry, and I can pull that up as well. I can't recite it off the top of my head what it is, but you're correct.
Great, good to know. Okay, I'm going to make a note here.
And I'll send that to you in an email as well.
Super, thank you. Okay, moving on here. So again, this is for our applicators. at disposal. Again, these are some of the fee examples that I've looked at other states. Again, their structures, they vary, where it's free up to X gallons or X pounds before they start hitting the fee structure. Other states have it where it's $5 for the first 5 gallons, $10 up to 50 gallons, $20 up to 100, $50 per tote. Some states that have maximum disposal, either in pounds or in gallons. We are looking at proposing to the enterprise that there be a max fee for our applicators that they would not have to pay regardless of the volume that they bring in, and depending on where we put a cap, if we put a cap. But ultimately, we're proposing that for our applicators, there only be a max fee of $50, regardless of the volume that they bring in. So the question for everyone is fee structure suggestions. Have we seen models that seem in other states that are effective? I think one of the pros and cons for having a zero fee up to X amount, and I've in some of the discussions, and Kelby, that may have been with you at one point, that sometimes having a fee tied to their disposal ultimately gives the applicator, the person that's bringing in the product to dispose of, a little skin in the game. And again, it all depends on obviously how we structure this, whether they're doing prepayment or paying at the time of the event. But any thoughts on that as far as for fee structures to the applicator?
Well, all of the numbers I see here on the presentation, is it going to be supplemented by the state? Because, for instance, number 3, $50 per tote, that's not paying for nothing. Tote's going to weigh 2,200 pounds if it's full.
Yes. This is the state would still ultimately is going to supplement the program, again, primarily through registration fees. It's going to really be the bulk of our budget. Again, looking at other state programs that have some applicator disposal fee that they're responsible for, is to have them vested in, they sign up, that they show up, and that they're, again, that the fee that they're charged is still reasonable, where it's not going to scare them off from wanting to use the disposal program. And again, that's something that's you can send me thoughts on if you have additional ideas as far as on how other states models, as far as how they structure the fees that apply to the applicator or the participant. Should there be disposal caps considered? Kelly, do you run into that where that's a necessity as far as if a program's overwhelmed or an event's overwhelmed? What do you see most states? How do they approach that?
Yeah, again, typically the only one that has a 2,000 pound limit is Oklahoma. And all the other states, it's a free for all. And for instance, Louisiana, they don't really enforce the registration sheets, so we're rolling into an event really not knowing the volume of material we're going to get. Arkansas does a much better job but it's also a more mature program. So they continue getting the registration, sheets in listing the volumes of material that's going to be brought in. Louisiana stopped just because they felt that it was a deterrent from the program. Then they've tried starting it back up, and we'll get registration sheets for, say, I don't know, 15,000 pounds, and then we'll do an event and it's 200,000 pounds. So it's just kind of hard to plan for the contractor.
I'm going to get into that question. I've got a specific question on that for those types of situations. So I won't get too far ahead of myself on that. Are there fees associated with totes or mini bulk containers, generally above and beyond? And I'm assuming you build that into your contract, that if for each tote it's X amount that you're charging the state.
Yeah, we all of them are typically just a per pound rate for liquids and solids. There's no no other. There may be some other fees for, forklift and labor and setup and mobilization, but typically it's just a per pound rate for transportation and disposal.
And that includes obviously the weight of the tote.
Yeah, correct.
Into that. Okay. Any other comments from anybody? Thoughts, concerns, suggestions? Okay. I'm going to actually jump ahead here. We have Kathy Chang that's joined us, and I know Kathy's on a timeline here, and she's been gracious to jump in here because we want to touch base on kind of just to provide an overview of what the state process is for our process for requests for information and the contract process. So I'll get all my terminology messed up, so I'll be quiet and I will let Kathy jump in to kind of explain that, and she's here to answer any questions that our contractors may have.
Thanks for having me here today, John. So I appreciate everyone attending this stakeholder meeting, and I really appreciate just carving that time, just kind of get a better understanding of the state's process in general, what we're hoping to plan for on how to secure a vendor in the future. And as you know, full disclosure, everything that we're doing here is still quite new, and it is contingent on the board's approval. So I will touch base on the selection process because we don't know for sure if we can compete, formally solicit, or select a vendor based on our findings through an RFI. So we are hoping to bring to the board what we call a request for information, kind of like a general bulletin to secure information from vendors in the market. So we don't really know entirely what's available out there, what all of our options are. We have an idea of, potential candidates, potential services we can incorporate, but we also don't know pricing. We don't know timing of available services and staffing availability from the vendors as well. So this request for information is to really just collect all of that marketing material. If you have not worked with the state before, that's a great opportunity to submit your information. It's free to submit information to the state during the RFI process. The RFI will have like a general scope of what we're looking for, what we're hoping to secure, what does it look like for pricing, cost-wise, and timing for vendors as well. So that's all that information gathering for consideration. So if the board does approve for us to post an RFI, there will be more information to share on how to find it, what to put together. There's no obligation. Vendors are not disqualified or anything if they don't respond to the RFI. That's really just more for us to collect market research without having to go through like significant hours of searching on our own or through third parties to kind of collect that information. So that will be what we're hoping to do as a selection process in the future, just based on that information, make our determination with the board's approval. Anything that we're going to do in the future for a selection process will be exempt from procurement code. So it will look similar to the state's procurement process in Colorado, but however, this enterprise is exempt through the law, and we are going to clearly state that in our RFI documents and paperwork. So we'll have some kind of structure to kind of build a selection process. However, procurement codes don't apply. So just want to make that clarity there. Once we've gone through the selection process or whatever process to procure a vendor or vendors, I'm not sure how that's going to look, we're going to follow a traditional state contracting process. So for CDA, we generally ask for the vendor's paperwork. So once we've got pricing, we've got scope, we have a path forward. The rest is just really the paperwork to kind of get it on board. So we'll follow the state's contract template. I've linked the state's templates here, and those are all just public information available for vendors who are interested in learning what the language looks like in the contract, what insurance requirements are there, what's required for our paperwork. So we will look for a certificate of good standing if you're registered in the state of Colorado. And we do require that any vendors that get paid from the state is registered in our system. So it's Colorado VSS. Those are a portal. That's a portal where vendors can go register on their own independently. You can upload your W-9, put your tax info in there, contact info, payment, preferred payment method there, and it's free to register. And you're just really registering to get an account set up with the system for the state. So any vendor can do that. For the one that we will contract with, that is required before we fully execute the contract. So contracting process generally takes about 30 days plus. It really just depends on the nature of the scope and the timing of the project. So generally that's what's going to look like down the road. That contracting process is contingent on the selection process, and the selection process is contingent on the board's approval. So there's going to be a long time before we even get to the contracting process. But time frame, as I'm sure Scott's mentioned, we don't really have that nailed down yet. It could vary. We're hoping to do some kind of narrowing down in like early January timeframe to kind of determine when to contract. As for services, John can speak more to that on when that's needed. In general, everything's still up in the air. We're still figuring that out right now. So a lot of it is contingent, but for the contracting process, that is pretty straightforward though, as that's public information. It's a standard process we follow. The insurance requirements don't change. Those are just our standard. And then certificate of standing, that's just a requirement to be contracted with the state, and registration is just set up for payment. So those don't change. It's just the selection process. We just don't know. And then the more that we do know, we'll certainly figure out how to publicly share that. John will provide more insight once we have more information to share, but this will not be quick procurement or anything. It will be sometime down the road. Because I know timing wise, we just don't know when we're going to need it because it's still a new enterprise, but we will still figure it out and contact folks as needed. And we'll reach out. The more you can share with us, the more insight or feedback on what you do, how you provide it, what challenges you guys face. Anything like that would be helpful for us to develop this program and our contract as well. So we're open to feedback, open to questions on what the RFI is. What the contracting process is. If we definitely did not cover that now, we can certainly provide that insight and follow up too. So that's really it in a nutshell for the administration part side of it. And then I'll let John, I'll give it back to John, but I'll be hanging around for a little bit until like 10:30 if you guys have any other questions. But if you think of it later and I'm not here to work, so welcome, just send John an email with that question. We can certainly get that answered and follow up. All right, hand it back to John. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Does anybody have any of our contractors have any questions for Kathy? Specific to contracts or the RFI or? And I will kind of touch on at the end of this. I'm going to kind of touch on our time frame, what the best laid plans are as we continue on. I'll give an overview on that, but. Okay, if I get questions, Kathy, I'll be sure to pass those along. So, all right, I'm going to roll back a few slides here. I think we were past that. So, moving on. So, questions as far as for our contractors, disposal data and reports. What information do you provide the state, or would you provide us after each event? And I guess that's the first question. Is what information do you guys generally provide?
Yeah, we most contractors can provide a report of total pounds of material that were collected. Most of them can split it up by profile. Uh, you know, the reports are kind of limited, but it's typically the information that you'll need. You know, yeah, it's easily available.
Okay. Along with that, then Kelby, now is that, can the contractors provide reports tied to the state to our registration portal? So if we have, especially if we do need to set this up in a basically an appointment scenario where we can track as far as exactly what's being disposed of for each person registered. Do you ever get down to that detail or work with states to be able to
No,
provide it?
we would have to weigh each individual's material as they drop it off, and again, that's going to slow down the process considerably. And it would have to be manually collected because, again, the report for number one is going to be generated for the materials that's received at the TSDF. They're gonna weigh. We typically weigh the containers when they're full on site, but it's also weighed again when it's received. I like doing that just because for checks and balances. But the report's going to be generated from the material received at the TSDF, and it'll be a per pound report by manifest, which is going to be specific to one shipment of waste.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments on that? Anybody? Okay. Disposal limitations. Questions. Are there products that contractors cannot accept for disposal that we need to be aware of?
Typically, no. Most hazardous waste disposal companies are in the business to dispose of hazardous materials or hazardous waste. The restrictions will be on what the state wants to pay for. For instance, we can take, anything, paints and automotive fluids, but you're only going to want to probably pay for the pesticides. So that would be the restriction is on the state level.
On that note, and I know that was a question that came up. If an applicator comes in that they didn't register or disclose, or it's beyond the state's scope, will the contractor work with them separately to still accept that at the time of an event?
Well, again, why would we need to work with them separately if the state's still going to pay for it?
Well, it'd be in a situation that the state wouldn't pay for. If it wasn't within our scope, if it's something that's not within our scope of what we'll be able to dispose of under our program, if an applicator or if someone came in and said, hey, I've got this product, but it's not within the scope of what the state will under their program, is that something that they can work with you separately? Or
yes, yes,
you guys do that? And then now in those situations, I guess, and do you guys have a kind of a standard fee that you charge people, or how does that work as far as what? And maybe you can't answer that on the spot as far as what.
It's too variable. There's too many options of what the material could be, so we really couldn't have just a set fee. They could have quart jar of mercury that they want to dispose of. Well, we couldn't charge $1 a pound because we would be taking in the shorts.
Yes.
And the same thing, they could bring in a chlorine cylinder from wastewater treatment plant down the street, and the same thing. It's going to be $3,000 to dispose of it, so it could be a set fee.
Okay. Now, is that something in some of with your other states that you work with? I mean, do they, in those circumstances, someone says, "Hey, I've got this," and like, well, it doesn't apply to our program, but do they just put that applicator or that person in touch with you directly and say, yeah, we've got a disposal event coming up in August. I'd like to bring this in, and then you work with the person in that situation to ultimately what you're going to
Yeah, yep,
charge for them to bring in.
absolutely.
Fantastic. Okay, great. That's good to know.
It's definitely helpful if we know in advance that it's coming, or we can make plans and actually provide the individual with an estimate of what it might cost for him to dispose of it. And if you do events in very rural areas, that's probably going to come up. They're going to have old paint cans and stuff that they want to dispose of, but your program's not going to pay for the disposal of it.
Yes. Okay. No, that's great. That's good to know. Is that something you generally write into your contracts as far as that you'll do that? You'll offer that as well, or is that beyond what this your agreement is, or is that just become is that ultimately an agreement between okay, you'll do this. If we get those questions, you need to reach out to the contractor and you can work that out for when you plan to bring in the products that do fall under our. Is that generally how that?
No, it's typically not in the contract, but again, we're all in the business of disposing of hazardous materials. So if it's hazardous materials, we typically want it. For it to be in the contract, it would have to be some language in the RFP or RFI for it to be in the contract.
Okay. Wondering, did you have a comment?
I think this is a good information for us, and then based on the liability, what the state's responsibility is, and particularly as long as you have that framework and service available for our stakeholders, I think that's great. And therefore, the events can really entertain all hazardous waste, and despite the state pay or not. I think that's great. I think the details we can work out, and then we can explore further on some of the experiences, and then what are the contractor's duty, and then what you also want the state basically as we facilitate the collection site, and then things like that. I think, but in general, in principle, I think this is good to know at this point.
Now, are there any disposal limit considerations? Do you ever run into that? I mean, I think I heard you say that there really is no limit as long as you know, but one question is, do we have to worry about that or consider that if there's a volume amount that we can't go over or need to think about?
No, it just helps for logistics if that inventory sheets that they turn in are accurate. Like your question to number 3 there, if they have more material that's on the inventory sheet, no, we're not going to turn it away. It just helps us plan because you can only fit a certain amount of material on an 18-wheeler trailer.
Okay, great. Are there specific needs we need to consider when selecting the location for disposal or recycling events?
A covered area with solid surface is ideal, because where you don't have to worry about, if it's going to rain or be bad weather. But solid surface is a must. Gravel and dirt are going to just cause problems.
Trevor, for recycling events?
Yeah, the area, it doesn't need to be covered or anything. I guess for the recycling then, it's just looking at the geography of the state and where most of the applicators are, specific counties or whatnot, that just make the most sense, that are more central for more people to get to. Because, for those, we'll just send our grinder out and just have it sitting there so people can come and we'll just grind it up on site.
Okay.
In Arkansas, a lot of times we're using, highway or state road department locations, fairgrounds, same thing in Oklahoma, fairgrounds. Um, Sometimes we even will use distribution station. It could be a Simplot or a Greenpoint Ag. They'll have, a warehouse with a dock that they'll loan to us. Those are typically enclosed and covered. Um, what we typically try to do in Louisiana, we're using either a Department Ag locations that are suited for a collection event, or a distribution station, a Simplot, or we've used a couple of Simplot locations here in Louisiana.
Yeah, to piggyback off that, that's what we do for the recycling aspect too. For other states, we have locations like Nutrients or Simplots or Helena's, and then also a lot of state department like noxious weed department buildings and county places like that, where they just have a spot for us.
Great. Do you have any other suggestions for the enterprise to make the program effective? Is there anything that we're missing here in our discussion or in our questions we need to think about?
Back to the location, electrical and water and bathrooms are nice to have. It's, water for, just washing up, and if we need to fill up an eye wash station. Electrical, sometimes we have to cut up containers because an applicator will come with trailer load of partially full 55-gallon drums that will drain and cut them up just for space capacity, or just you just never know what they're going to bring. So electricity sometimes is nice to have.
But I mean, you made me think about something. So in the situation, and I'm assuming all the years you've done this, you guys have probably run into this, but what in the situation if you have a container someone brings in either in the process of transferring it from them to you, where there's a spill or some type of event like that, how do you guys normally? I'm assuming you guys just clean it up and then pack up the disposal waste and take it, or how do you guys address that?
Yeah, we're going to put a heavy liner down, and then we're going to actually cover. It's a 20 mil liner. We're going to cover it with 8 mil plastic. The whole work area is going to be covered with plastic. There's going to be spills. It's impossible. The containers are brittle, which brings up another point that we should have mentioned earlier when we were talking about transporting it. They need to bag up spilled containers and obviously try to prevent any leaks or spills in transportation, because again the jugs and the totes have been sitting out in the sun just cooking. But back to the collection site, we're gonna leave it cleaner than when we arrived, because we're gonna clean it up after the fact. But there'll be plastic put down to protect the surface.
Okay, that makes perfect sense.
And that you need to put that in your scope of work. That's a must.
I have that noted too. Thank you.
Any other thoughts or suggestions that we need to be considering or that we haven't covered?
John, yeah, I suggest if all panelists and then attendees agree to take a 10 minutes break because it's going to be longer. And we have almost covered most of it, but still we have a lot. If that is good, probably we can take a 10 minutes break and then come back.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
I have a hard stop in 8 minutes. So,
Okay.
I tell you what, Wonder Ed,
Then,
can I've only got two more
yeah,
slides
yeah.
here.
Go ahead. Go
Actually,
ahead. No, it's
I think we have covered pretty much everything. But so just let me go over. That's Kathy's slide for the contracts. So just kind of as we're wrapping up, and then we'll come back just for open discussion after the break. If anybody has questions after this, and but just an overview then, kind of what our timeline is. I think we have covered all of my at least initial questions here, and I really appreciate everybody's feedback so far. But kind of our goals here between now and heading into next year. So from July, starting next month, we'll be begin working with the enterprise board. We're going to be developing and getting approval of our bylaws. We'll be proposing rules based on our stakeholder feedback. As Kathy mentioned, we'll be putting out and developing the RFI for the request for information, and working on developing those contracts. I'll be working on hiring a program manager for the program. Necessary staff training. Of course, one of the things we want to have our program manager have the necessary HAZWOPER training and all the pesticide safety training that someone in this position needs to have and be aware of. Develop disposal registration portal. Again, based on our feedback from this stakeholder, how we develop that portal. Of course, developing our communications and outreach, the program materials. Kelby and Trevor, any information that you have that we need to help put into our communications and our outreach materials, so applicators know and understand what they need to do for future events that we'll be developing. Of course, we'll be working on developing our website, communication materials, getting that on our website for future events that we are planning. We'll be doing a lot of applicator outreach and surveys. We really want to get a good finger on the pulse of the industry. What areas of the state have the greatest need for our initial events? Again, the RFI for the disposal companies, identify disposal and recycling event sites, and that's going to be working with whether that be our dealers or our extension. I know we have a disposal company site here in Colorado as well. So ultimately working with them, getting agreements to host future events. And then ultimately by, again, no later than June 2027, obviously, I mean, before June, we need to have the contracts finalized, approved by the enterprise, because ultimately those will go before the enterprise board to approve and then finalize those contracts and the site events. And then from 2027, July 2027 through December, our goal is we want to have at least one disposal event, one recycling event sometime between August and September. Again, conceptually, obviously, we're working with our contractors to see if those time frames work. Again, communication with the industry, event announcement, post-event, collecting disposal information and developing our required legislative reports. One of our requirements in the bill was that in April of 2028, we have to report to the legislature of what we've accomplished in our first year. And then each year thereafter, we'll have to report the amounts that we're disposing of. And then identify program needs, make adjustments, further legislation or rule clarity after we really get through our first season of the program. So that's just kind of the heads up of our time frame and our plans of what we'll be working on between now and December of 2027. So, yes, Sonia.
So I do have an anonymous question. Are you ready for a question from the attendees?
Yeah, let's go ahead and if we can take the question real quick before the break here, and then we'll
Okay.
break.
Are the disposal and recycling events going to occur simultaneously? If yes, Trevor said the items need to be cleaned and triple rinsed, but yet the disposal won't collect rinsates. How is the recycling going to work then?
We do not intend to hold the events simultaneously. We intend to have a separate disposal event and a separate recycling event. So there's no confusion between the two. Okay. If there's, why don't we go ahead and we'll take the break. Let's come back at 10:40. And then we'll continue on. And really, it's going to be open discussion at that point, because I think we've covered everything as far as in my slides in the initial questions. We'll pick right back up here. So we'll see everybody at 10:40.
Thank you.
John, I need to drop off the call. So if you would just email me.
Hit the buttons there. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. We'll jump back in here. And again, what I've put together here are essentially the questions that we covered through the course of the presentation I put together, and the overview of the program and things that we're looking at to consider. Again, we will provide the presentation to everyone. We're going to put this on the website. So, but then individually too, if you'd like to have me send it direct, I can. But we will provide this to everybody. And again, multiple pages just of all the questions there that we've already covered. So really, we're just back at this point just for any open discussion, considerations, thoughts, additional comments on aspects that we need to consider for the program. So I'll open it up to everyone remaining. Yes, Christopher.
Hey, John. Yeah, this is Christopher Finarelli with the Household and Commercial Products Association. I know we have a meeting designated for registrants on Thursday, and looking forward to that. Since there was a slide on the registration fees, I was hoping to speak to that, if that's all right with the department.
Sure, absolutely.
So I think. I guess I just wanted to focus on this question of what other states are doing. Just somewhat concerned that the discussion is shifting toward asking what other states are doing rather than what the letter and intent of the law is. And HB 1111 shows clear intent to benefit commercial and professional related products, and then provides an exemption process to reconcile that. And it explicitly states that commercial applicators, private applicators are the direct beneficiaries. During the legislative process, it was made clear that it was who was going to benefit from the program. So I do believe that remains the sort of appropriate baseline question. As to the baseline question is not being what other states are doing, which I think is a good question to ask because it's a good way to have lessons learned. But as a first, again, baseline question, I think the big issue is whether the products are being assessed are the products HB 1111 was designed to benefit. And that's a direct nexus to how the law was structured, what it explicitly says, and the declarative language that opens up the law, as well as the committee testimony that happened throughout the process. So I know there'll be other opportunities to speak to that, but just since that's it looks like kind of a core element of how the fees are being designed, and I wanted to caution that we make sure we're looking at the bill itself as well. Thanks, John.
No, actually, I appreciate that, Christopher. Thank you. Other questions, comments?
Thank you, Christopher. And then I think the whole intent of this stakeholder discussion is basically to really hear from different perspective, and then the way also that the stakeholders are categorized in a different way is so that we can focus, and then we can have that focused discussion on to really address the various interests, the various elements of their contribution towards the success of this program, and then basically to really hear and then listen to, so that we have an informed process. And then, of course, the rulemaking process, the enterprise is also basically open to the public, to all stakeholders. But I think at this stage, it's critical. And so any other information, basically to learn from others, to learn from the stakeholders. That's the intent. Otherwise, absolutely, that the law is the law. That definitely define the dimensions, and then where our scope is. So, and I think open discussion is just any other concern, any other issue which we have not considered, or which we should really look into and expand on others. I think that definitely this stakeholder platform is very kind of narrow, small, diverse in scope, but very few stakeholders are really just included. Therefore, but very critical element of or part of the program in the future.
Any other thoughts or comments, questions? Okay, well, we will be having, again, we have same time tomorrow and Thursday. Tomorrow will be commercial applicators and private applicators. We've requested those stakeholders to come in, and we're going to cover a very similar presentation, a little more geared directly to some of the questions geared directly towards our commercial and private applicators. And then on Thursday will be our pesticide product registrants. Again, we're going to cover the same bulk of the presentation, but with some questions directed very specifically for our registrants that we would like feedback from them. So again, everyone's welcome to join those as well if you have the time. So we really appreciate everybody's comments and willingness to be here and to take the time to give us feedback so we can make a informed decision as we move forward and we develop the rules for the enterprise. So, Wonder Ed, do you have any other thoughts or comments? And I think we could probably adjourn the meeting unless there's anything else.
Thank you, John. I appreciate the way you presented the entire outline of the law, the program, or in the intent, the various breakdown of the program, and then of course identifying questions where basically was that we want to learn from, and then also learn experience as well, and absolutely we'll hear this as more or less similar, but a little bit focused to various stakeholders, but otherwise the core of the presentation will be the same, but the discussion will really focus on different areas. Really, thank you for your time, for your commitment, And then I think this is just the beginning. I think we are very much excited to have this program on board, and then we are, I think, based on the information that we learn, we are one of the few states who do not have program, and therefore I think it's the best opportunity for us to learn from others, because we are a latecomer in this program, having a statewide disposal program, state supported and led. And so, this is exciting because we are not really starting, as we have heard also from others, that there are plenty of experiences, plenty of best practices where they have learned from their own challenge. So I think we'll have a very, very, good and then program, and then also to provide an outlet for particularly the rural ag industry and the applicator, which do not currently have outlets. So we are very much excited, and then thank you so much. And so I think this is a beginning, and then we'll have also lots of opportunity in the future also to work side by side. Thank you. And I think with this we can end our first round of stakeholder discussion today. Thank you all for your support.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you, Sonia.
Yeah. Bye.